1,000 years ago, the world was consumed by a brutal demon war. Without warning, monstrous creatures surged across the front lines, slaughtering humans in an unrelenting assault. Desperate to survive, humanity fought back, but the war seemed endless. The earth was soaked in blood, and the relentless tide of beasts pushed humanity to the brink of annihilation. Then, from the depths of despair, a lone magician appeared, clad in darkness. He soared across the battlefield atop a fearsome black dragon. His unmatched power tore through the monstrous horde, his mere presence striking terror into the hearts of the beasts. To humanity, he was a beacon of hope, a hero destined to change the course of fate. But at the war's climax, he met an untimely and enigmatic death, leaving behind only a prophecy. The chosen one, the one who craves strength yet defies corruption. I have been waiting for you. And so, the real story begins. In the present day, people are gathered watching a live boxing event on their phones. The screen flickers to life, revealing the host standing in the ring. With a commanding voice, he announces the night's main event, the 17th title defense of the reigning world champion. The crowd roars in anticipation as the fighters are introduced. In the blue corner stands Patrick. His supporters erupt into cheers, urging him to defeat his opponent. But when the camera shifts to the red corner, the atmosphere changes. Standing there is Kim Jin-ho, handsome, muscular, and exuding an unshakable confidence. The majority of the crowd is on his side, chanting his name, already expecting another victory. The host stirs excitement by speculating on Kim Jin-ho's rumored injury. Observers have noted that he hasn't used his legs in recent fights. Patrick, aware of this, believes that targeting Jin-ho's weakened legs could secure his victory. After all, Jin-ho is over 40 now. Perhaps his time as champion is coming to an end. The match begins. Patrick stares at his opponent, overwhelmed by his sheer presence. He is truly a champion. But if the rumors about his injured leg are true, then victory is within reach. Lost in thought, Patrick is caught off guard. In an instant, Kim Jin-ho launches a powerful kick to his stomach, sending him reeling. Shocked, Patrick realizes the truth. His opponent is arrogant enough to fight with an injured leg. Furious, he vows to end this match by ensuring Jin-ho never uses that leg again. Seizing the opportunity, Patrick grabs Jin-ho's weakened leg and attempts to slam him down. But Jin-ho swiftly counters, uses his other leg to deliver a devastating kick. The impact is so powerful that Patrick is sent flying, losing consciousness upon impact. The host announces the winner. Kim Jin-ho remains a champion. Standing over his fallen opponent, Jin-ho smirks. His voice drips with arrogance as he makes his message clear. Even with an injured leg, I can still be world champion. After the match, Jin-ho exits the arena, making his way toward the exit when his coach rushes after him. The press conference is waiting, and the fans are eager to hear from their champion. But Jin-ho dismisses the idea, uninterested in the formalities. He orders his coach to handle it himself and to inform him when the next match is scheduled. Frustrated, the coach tries to persuade him, emphasizing the importance of acknowledging his fans. But Jin-ho refuses, walking away without a second thought. Outside, the rain pours heavily and traffic congestion builds. His coach urges him to take a car home, but Jin-ho ignores the advice. Instead, he decides to run. The coach is stunned. It's a 30-kilometer distance, yet Jin-ho doesn't hesitate. As he dashes into the storm, reporters swarm his coach with questions. They demand to know his whereabouts, details about the match, and whether the rumors of his leg injury were just a bluff. Meanwhile, Jin-ho runs through the rain, his mind drifting to the past. Memories of his debut fight surface. His first victory, the cheers, the glory. More memories flash by, each one a testament to his relentless pursuit of strength. By the time he reaches his apartment on the 34th floor, he is drenched. After freshening up, he sits at his desk and turns on his PC. His gaze locks onto the screen. It's time to begin. The game before him is Last Savior, a game infamous for its extreme difficulty, one that even seasoned Korean players had given up on. Yet, for the past 10 years, Kim Jin-ho has played it daily, training, honing his skills, facing stronger and stronger opponents. Fighting has been his life, but in reality, something has long faded within him. Sitting before his glowing screen, Kim Jin-ho focused intently on the game. Fully immersed, he spoke to his in-game character, asking if it would be possible to win today. Whenever he played, it felt as if he was truly inside the game. Tonight, his opponent was Demon King Azar. As the battle began, Jin-ho analyzed the demon's strength, wondering if he could break through at this rate. But before he could strategize further, Azar launched a sudden attack. Jin-ho's character failed to dodge in time, and frustration surged through him. How could he let that happen? Determined, he countered with a powerful strike, forcing the Demon King back. But something felt strange. The battle pattern seemed unusually simple today. His attacks were landing too easily. Then, a mysterious blue lion's aura emerged behind his character. Jin-ho found himself in an ironic situation. He had started this challenge because he wanted to win, but now, for the first time, he feared victory. Demon King Azar rose again, and Jin-ho encouraged him to fight back, both with his words and his precise control. However, despite the effort, Azar was defeated. The game announced his victory. A sense of boredom washed over him. Who should he fight next? Perhaps that giant bear? Before he could decide, a sudden thunderbolt struck the floor of his apartment. The power went out, plunging the room into darkness. Then a voice, dizzy and disoriented. Someone muttered to themselves. Their body felt numb. Where were they? Nothing made sense. A boy came into view. It was the same voice from before. The rain poured heavily around him. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind. 218, let's go together. Turning around, the boy saw a blonde-haired boy approaching. The stranger placed a hand on his shoulder, saying he had been calling him for a while. There was no time to waste. They needed to leave immediately, but confusion clouded the boy's mind. Who was this person? Where was he? His eyes fell on a number printed on the blonde-haired boy's shirt, 172. Looking around, he noticed a massive crowd, all dressed in the same orange uniform, rushing somewhere in a hurry. The sight triggered a flood of questions. Something about this place felt familiar, but he couldn't recall why. Before he could dwell on it, the blonde-haired boy grabbed him again, shaking him. There was no time for hesitation. This was their last chance to escape from Carrion. Hearing that name, the boy froze in shock. Carrion? Was this place really Carrion? The blonde-haired boy grabbed Jin-ho's collar, his voice filled with urgency. There was no time to hesitate. They had to move now, but Jin-ho couldn't shake the disbelief settling in his mind. Was this a dream? No, the sensations were too real. There was no way this was an illusion. Then, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. Had he somehow entered the game he was playing? And worse, was he trapped inside as a prisoner? In reality, Kim Jin-ho, the world champion, had been struck by lightning. For reasons unknown, he had been transported into the world of his own game. Around him, the prisoners of Carrion were in a frenzy, rushing toward the massive gate in a desperate attempt to escape. They pushed with all their strength, determined to break free. Jin-ho, however, grabbed the blonde-haired boy beside him, stopping him in his tracks. Something felt wrong. This situation didn't make sense. The blonde-haired boy snapped at him in frustration, calling him crazy. But Jin-ho wasn't convinced. If this was really Carrion, then something was off. The prisoner shouldn't be overpowering the guard so easily. It was too careless, too convenient. The blonde-haired boy explained that the prison's chief, Clark, had left in a hurry earlier that day. That was why the guard were so weak. It was a perfect opportunity to escape. He urged Jin-ho to focus on getting out, but Jin-ho's instincts screamed at him that this was a trap. Instead of letting the blonde-haired boy run toward the gate, he grabbed him by the collar and dragged him away from the crowd. The blonde-haired boy thrashed against his grip, shouting in anger. The gate was opening. He had to get out, but Jin-ho ignored his pleas. If his instinct were right, stepping through that gate would mean death. The prisoner, however, cheered in triumph as the massive gate finally creaked open. Overwhelmed with joy, they rushed outside, celebrating their freedom. The blonde-haired boy struggled harder, demanding to be let go. But before he could break free, Jin-ho pulled him deeper into the prison. Outside, the prisoners sprinted toward freedom. But their joy was short-lived. Without warning, a sharp blade sliced through the air, A prisoner at the front screamed in agony as his hand was severed from his body. A chilling silence followed. Then, panic erupted among the prisoners as a familiar, terrifying voice echoed through the courtyard. Chief Clark had arrived. A cruel smirk stretched across his face as he looked down at the escapees. Did they truly believe they could leave so easily? If they wanted to leave, they would do so as corpses. Without hesitation, he gave the command, "Kill them all." Chaos broke out as his men descended upon the prisoners like wolves among sheep. Swords flashed, cutting through flesh. Screams of agony filled the air as heads and limbs fell to the ground. Jinho held the blonde-haired boy back as they watched the massacre unfold. This was exactly why he had stopped him. It had been a trap all along. The few prisoners who survived turned and ran back inside, terror overtaking them. But it was too late. Clark's men cut them down one by one. Within minutes, the ground was drenched in blood. The once hopeful escape had turned into a nightmare. Clark ordered the remaining prisoners to stand in a straight line, warning them that if anyone moved, they would be next. The blonde-haired boy, unable to handle the carnage, vomited. Before he could recover, one of the guards grabbed him by the hair, mocking him for breaking the order. From now on, anyone who moved would be killed. Jinho assessed the situation. These men were no match for real warriors. But if they continued slaughtering at this pace, another massacre would begin soon. If that happened, he would have no choice but to fight. Clark stepped forward, his gaze landing on Jinho. With a sneer, he mocked him, calling him a coward. One of the officers laughed, agreeing that even considering Jinho as a rival was humiliating. Clark's smirk widened. Jinho would regret not dying today. Then he spoke a name, Arahan. Jinho froze. Hearing that name sent a shock through his body. Slowly, his gaze lowered to the rainwater pooling at his feet. The water had turned red with blood, and in its reflection, he saw something unexpected. A name, a new identity. In this world, he was Arahan. A week had passed since Jinho, now known as Arahan, arrived at the prison camp. He spent his days stacking stone towers, a meaningless task designed solely to torment the prisoners. As he worked, his mind wandered, reflecting on what he had learned about himself in the past few days. Life in Carrion was grueling. Even moving a single stone left him completely exhausted, a stark contrast to the strength he once had. His body felt weak, confirming his suspicion. He was no longer the world champion, but a frail 15-year-old. There was something else troubling him. He had secretly tried using magic at night, but achieved no results. It made no sense. The Arahan family was known for producing powerful mages, yet he couldn't use magic. Was that why he had been abandoned here? Given how many heirs the Arahan family had, it was possible they had simply cast him aside. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a prison officer monitoring him. The man barked at him to move the stone tower to the other side, growing impatient with his slow pace. Arahan sighed. It was a pointless task, but he had no choice. As he struggled with his workload, he noticed a notification. Synchronization in progress. His body was still adjusting to this world, but the process felt endless. Frustration built inside him. When would it finally be complete? Later, the prisoners gathered for breakfast. The food was as unappetizing as ever, and Arahan grimaced at the sight of it. He had been exercising daily, but with meals like this, staying fit seemed impossible. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. The blonde-haired boy from before approached him, asking if he was skipping breakfast again. Arahan glanced at his meal before pushing it toward him. The boy happily accepted, thanking him. Watching him, Arahan thought about how different he was from the other prisoners. While everyone else avoided him, this boy had no fear. The name Arahan carried terrifying rumors, stories about red eyes cursed from killing too many people, a symbol of certain death. Yet, this boy remained by his side. They were of similar age and even shared the same cell. Arahan couldn't remember their past interactions, but he found himself wondering why someone so young had ended up in Carrion. The boy's voice pulled him from his thoughts. He warned Arahan to be careful, explaining that because of him, the workload had increased, making the other prisoners restless. They weren't happy. Arahan glanced around, noticing how full of energy the other prisoners seemed. No wonder. The boy continued, mentioning a specific prisoner, number 584. He was dangerous, a well-known killer from the arena. It would be best to stay away from him. Arahan smirked. If 584 was that dangerous, wouldn't it be risky for the blonde-haired boy to stick around him too? The boy shrugged. Even so, he had grown fond of Arahan and couldn't simply ignore him. Arahan sighed, telling him to move out of the way. Confused, the boy asked what he was talking about. Arahan's eyes shifted to the distance. The thing he had been worried about was about to happen. They turned around, and there he was, prisoner 589, accompanied by his gang. The blonde-haired boy stiffened in fear. 589 approached Arahan, his expression dark. Word had spread that the increased workload was because of him. Arahan met his gaze arrogantly. If that was the case, he might as well use it as part of his workout. The response enraged 589. He lunged at Arahan, aiming a punch straight at his face. But Arahan reacted swiftly, dodging the attack with ease. He grabbed 589's collar and delivered a powerful kick. The blonde-haired boy and the gang watched in shock. But something was wrong. Arahan quickly realized his attacks had no effect. His movements felt weak, his strikes lacking power. That's when it hit him. He wasn't a champion here. He was just a frail 15-year-old. 589 smirked. The attack had been meaningless, mocking him. He grabbed Arahan's collar and hurled him across the ground with brutal force. Arahan hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his body. Just then, a notification appeared. Synchronization complete. A slow smirk spread across Arahan's face. A sudden surge of blue aura erupted from Arahan's body. In that moment, he felt something return, his strength, his energy. His body stretched, growing taller as he regained a familiar sense of power. Stepping forward, he adjusted his stance, setting up his boxing pose. A smirk formed on his lips as he muttered under his breath, "Get back inside." Prisoner 589 let out a mocking laugh. For someone abandoned by their own clan, Arahan sure seemed full of himself. But Arahan remained unfazed, arrogance dripping from his voice as he challenged the prisoner, taunting him to quiet down and step forward. Was he scared? The prisoner's expression darkened. If Arahan wanted to fight, he'd gladly oblige. Without hesitation, Arahan launched a punch, but before it could land, the prisoner grabbed his wrist with a sneer. He called Arahan a pathetic little rat, warning him to know his place. But Arahan was faster. Twisting his body, he countered with a powerful kick, sending the prisoner staggering back. He didn't stop there. Strike after strike, he unleashed a relentless barrage of kicks. Though his strength had yet to fully return, his instincts as a world champion remained sharp. The brutal assault left 589 completely unconscious. Looking down at his fallen opponent, Arahan scoffed. "This is why I tried not to use my legs." Seeing their leader defeated, the gang members erupted in anger. How dare Arahan lay a hand on their boss? Fueled by rage, they swore to make him suffer, vowing to kill him in the most agonizing way possible. Arahan remained composed. Placing his foot on 589's back, he issued a warning. If anyone dared to move closer, he'd make sure their leader would spend the rest of his life begging for food. If they didn't want that fate, they had one option: bring the warden. The prisoners hesitated, stunned by his audacity. Was this a joke? Arahan's grip tightened on 589's arm. If they needed proof, he'd rip it off right then and there. Fear settled over the gang. Without another word, they picked up their unconscious leader and carried him away. As they retreated, 589 groggily spat out a threat. This time, Arahan had won, but next time, he wouldn't be so lucky. The tension faded as the blonde-haired boy rushed over, excitement shining in his eyes. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. When had Arahan learned to fight like that? His kicks were incredible. Then he paused, noticing something strange. Arahan seemed taller. He had always assumed they were the same height. Arahan, still smirking, casually responded that the boy could grow taller too. He just needed to keep hoisting those stones. The boy frowned. Could lifting stones really make someone taller? Meanwhile, Arahan's mind was racing. The synchronization process had turned his real-life stats into game stats. Even so, compared to his original body, this one still felt like a child's. But right now, none of that mattered. The most important thing was finally checking his stat screen. He had been waiting for this moment. Summoning the screen, his eyes quickly scanned the information, then his expression froze. Something was wrong. Mana, 0. That couldn't be right. Arahan was supposed to be a magician. How could his mana be completely gone? His stats were absurdly bad. How could they give him such a useless build, and then transfer his consciousness into it? Lost in thought, Arahan raised his hand, interacting with the invisible screen. To anyone else, it looked like he was moving his fingers randomly in the air. The blonde-haired boy noticed and stared at him in confusion. What the hell was he doing? Later, lying on his bed, Arahan stared at the stat screen, trying to make sense of the situation. The character he'd been placed in, it was almost creepy. Discarded by the Bampunara clan, abandoned without hesitation. Still, there was hope. His strength, agility, endurance, and perception were all maxed at 100. It was a miracle, considering how fragile this body was. Perhaps, with the right physical training, he could overcome the penalty. However, his diet was severely lacking. Then, something else caught his eye, skills he had never seen before. All of them were S rank, immortal duelist, tenacious challenger, champion's noble soul, Archmage's blessing. If these weren't just for show, there had to be a way to fix the mana issue. Just then, an officer's voice echoed through the prison. He began calling out numbers one by one. Number 114, number 456, number 891, number 2918, 2162, 1218. The blonde-haired boy let out a sigh. Another group was being taken away. Arahan, curious, asked who those people were. The boy's face remained neutral as he explained. They were death row inmates, heading out for their final meal. Final meal? Arahan's smirk returned. So, this was how things worked here. His attention shifted back to the boy. Until now, he had never asked for his name. The boy thought for a moment before finally introducing himself. He had only been calling Arahan by his number. After all, his name was Ryu. Like many here, he had no clan. Arahan responded in kind. Zed Arahan. A pause. Then Arahan asked a question that made Ryu freeze. Did he want to get out of here? Ryu hesitated before replying. He had his reasons for leaving. He wasn't planning on staying here forever. Arahan's interest peaked. Had he thought about how to escape? Ryu sighed, thinking the only exit was through the front gate, but the warden had the key. Arahan considered this. That meant they had to take down the warden. Ryu immediately shot down the idea. Was Arahan insane? The warden might be retired, but he was still a five-circle knight. His name was Warden Clark, a man notorious for his hatred of magicians. In this world, knights and magicians despise each other, and Clark was the very embodiment of that conflict. Arahan pondered the challenge before him. A retired five-circle knight. Could he even stand a chance against him now? But then, a different thought crossed his mind. There was another way. Instead of defeating the warden, they could steal from him. Ryu scoffed at the idea. Stealing? Arahan clearly had no idea. People from the streets learned how to pick pockets before they even learned manners. But stealing from the warden was nearly impossible. There were always too many eyes on him, leaving almost no opportunity. A smirk crept onto Arahan's face. That was all he needed to know. The pieces of his escape plan were slowly falling into place. The next morning, the officers barked orders at the prisoners, commanding them to start their work. But today, something was different. Under the warden's command, the workload had been increased. From now on, they wouldn't just walk, they had to run. The sudden change left the prisoners in shock. Some protested, demanding to know how many more times they'd have to go through this. Others pleaded for the workload to be kept manageable. But the officer wasn't interested in arguments. Instead, he coldly reminded them that questioning the orders meant rebelling against the warden himself. Prisoner 589, watching the scene unfold, muttered under his breath, "If only these fools had stayed still." Before he could finish, a sword was placed at his neck. The officer reminded him that he was merely relaying the warden's orders. If anyone had a problem, they could take it up with the warden directly. A prisoner whispered in disbelief. This is going too far. What was the real reason behind all of this? The officer smirked and coughed, subtly shifting his gaze toward Aaron. The message was clear. Everyone turned to stare at him. Then, as if he had no more to say, the officer excused himself for a smoke and left. The tension in the air thickened. The prisoners' gazes turned hostile. Ryu immediately understood the situation. Everyone was furious at Aaron. Wasting no time, he warned Aaron that the prisoners were on edge. Aaron, completely unfazed, told Ryu to stay away from him. Taking the hint, Ryu quickly ran off. Aaron clenched his fists. This was Clark's doing, unable to take action himself. The so-called honorable knight was trying to incite the prisoners to do his dirty work. This time, even the wardens were in on it, but Aaron wouldn't let things slide like yesterday. Zed couldn't die here. The prisoners, now fully riled up, had made their decision. If they didn't kill Aaron, they were as good as dead themselves. But Aaron met their hostility with arrogance. He understood their anger. It was an unavoidable situation after all. His words only fueled their fury. Without hesitation, they charged at him. Aaron dodged effortlessly, countering each attack with precise strikes. He smirked. Dying here so easily? That wasn't an option. One prisoner, struggling to land a hit, gritted his teeth. Had this bastard completely lost it? Aaron barely paid him any mind. Instead, he welcomed the fight. He needed an outlet for his frustration, and this was perfect. Another prisoner seethed with rage. Had Aaron gone insane, thinking he was about to die? He'd put an end to him right now. Aaron grinned, taunting them to attack all at once. Deep down, he had always dreamed of this, a fight where opponents wouldn't come at him one by one. He wanted them to charge together, giving him the real thrill of battle. And they did. A mob of prisoners swarmed him, attacking in unison. Aaron's grin widened. This was it. Even as they came at him all at once, he dodged effortlessly. The rush, the exhilaration of avoiding a strike at the last second, the satisfaction of landing a clean hit. It was intoxicating. He was addicted to this feeling. This was why he got into martial arts. From a distance, Ryu watched in disbelief. What he was witnessing wasn't normal. Aaron was too strong. It was unreal. Just then, prisoner 589 called out to Ryu, telling him to come over for a moment. Meanwhile, Aaron remained in his element, skillfully dodging and countering every attack. The prisoners, overwhelmed by his strength, could only curse him. Again and again, they lunged at him, but he was always one step ahead. The sheer thrill of the battle kept him going, his movements sharp and precise. One prisoner, number 245, finally spoke up. Aaron should stop rampaging and just accept his fate. That's when Aaron noticed something. Ryu, the prisoners had captured him. A smirk spread across Aaron's face as they taunted him. Friendship was more important, wasn't it? If you want to see Ryu alive, he had no choice. He had to surrender. But instead of fear, Aaron's expression darkened with amusement. They had just made a huge mistake. Prisoner 589 smirked, taunting Aaron. Now that his friend was in their hands, there was no escape. Would he save himself or his companion? But Aaron remained unfazed. Fear wasn't his weakness, it was theirs. That's why they resorted to blackmail. Prisoner 245 scoffed, considering an honor to even acknowledge Aaron. As a two-circle knight, he looked down on someone with no mana. It was inevitable. Aaron was bound to meet his doom. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, aiming his blade at Aaron. But before his strike could land, Aaron vanished in a blur. Prisoner 245's eyes widened as he noticed prisoner 589 collapsed on the ground, while Ryu, free from captivity, was thanking Aaron for saving him. Shocked, prisoner 245 demanded answers. How had Aaron done it? Moving so fast, evading his attack, and taking down their leader, all without magic? Arahan only chuckled. This wasn't magic. It was a simple fighting trick. A flashback revealed what had happened moments earlier. Arahan had swiftly kicked prisoner 589 to ground before anyone could react. Before the tension could escalate further, the chief arrived. His stern voice demanded an explanation. Why had Arahan attacked the other prisoners? Ryu immediately spoke up in Arahan's defense. He wasn't the aggressor. He was the victim. The prisoners had ganged up on him and even tried to kill Ryu. Arahan had only acted in self-defense. The chief observed the fallen prisoners and scoffed internally. Pathetic. Even with so many against one, they still couldn't take down a single boy. Then, shifting his attention back to Arahan, he asked a crucial question. Had Arahan unleashed his mana? Arahan simply responded with intrigue. He wondered. At that moment, a dark, oppressive aura surged from the chief. Powerful waves of purple and black energy spread across the area. The sheer force overwhelmed the prisoners, forcing them to their knees. But Arahan stood unaffected. Ryu, witnessing this, was stunned. Why wasn't Arahan collapsing like the others? Arahan calmly explained. No ordinary person could withstand the aura of a five-circle knight. Suddenly, a system notification appeared before him. Trait: Champion's noble souls resist suppression. A powerful force awakened within Arahan. He analyzed a new trait, one he had never encountered before. Resistance? Could this be a mental immunity trait? If so, it was an unbelievably powerful ability. After all, he had already reached the pinnacle in his world. The chief narrowed his eyes. A mere half-baked five-circle amateur like Arahan shouldn't be able to resist him. Yet there he stood, completely unaffected, even without unlocking his mana. Displeased, the chief intensified his aura, increasing its deadly pressure. The surrounding prisoners and officers were pushed to their limits, barely able to withstand the overwhelming force. Yet, Arahan remained unchanged. His trait was even stronger than the chief's aura. A smirk formed on Arahan's face. This was an S-rank trait. Nothing the chief did could affect him. The chief couldn't believe it. This was impossible. The other officers, struggling under the immense pressure, pleaded with the chief to stop before they died from the strain. Reluctantly, the chief withdrew his aura. With the test over, he ordered everyone back to work. As the crowd dispersed, Arahan called out to the chief. He had something to say. The chief turned, unimpressed, and asked what it was. Arahan, expression unchanging, stated his decision. He was done stacking stones. He was tired of constantly watching his back, anticipating another attack from the prisoners. So, he had decided to end it all. Ryu was shocked. What was Arahan saying? Was he serious? Arahan clarified. He meant it literally. He would become a death row inmate. The chief's expression hardened. Did he even understand what that meant? If this was just some impulsive decision, there would be no forgiveness. Arahan smirked. Was the chief worried he might backtrack? If so, he should record it on the crystal ball as proof. The chief found this amusing. There was no better evidence than that. Without hesitation, he called for the warden, ordering him to bring the crystal ball immediately. Arahan, now fully committed to his decision, couldn't hide his excitement. He knew that before execution, death row inmates were granted a final meal of their choice. And for his last supper, he had already made his decision. He wanted verity beef. Not just a portion. He wanted enough to eat his fill. Gasps echoed around him. The mere mention of verity beef left everyone stunned. The cost of such a meal for a death row inmate was unthinkable. Verity beef, the highest quality meat, naturally raised on a verity prairie in the Southern Empire. It was one of the most prized dishes in Lay's Last Savior. Legend spoke of its incredible taste, capable of restoring lost strength, even turning the tide of battle. There was even a quest where bribing an NPC with it could change the course of an event. Arahan's choice left the entire prison in disbelief. Arahan knew he had an important fight coming up. He needed to stock up while he could, and honestly, he wouldn't mind tasting something as incredible as verity beef at least once. Turning to the chief, he made his stance clear. Considering the cost was his life, was it only fair? Besides, he only dealt with S-rank items. And if anyone tried any shady business, there would be consequences. Ryu, still in shock, questioned Arahan's decision. Death row, was he really sure about this? Without hesitation, Arahan pointed at Ryu. He was coming along too. They needed enough for 2 people to eat to their heart's content. Ryu, completely taken aback, protested. When had he ever agreed to this? Ignoring his reaction, the chief gave the order to make all necessary arrangements. Days passed, and Arahan remained focused. Since Verity beef took a week to procure due to its rarity, he didn't waste time. He never stepped away from his work and was instead served by the wardens while he continued his training. This special system had a unique effect. If even one of the stats reached 100, then any additional experience points would automatically transfer to his other stats. Due to certain traits and penalties, his strength, agility, and endurance had all been reduced to 100 minus 50, while perception remained at 100 and mana stayed at 0. Since all his stats except mana were maxed out, any experience gained here would directly boost his mana. Meanwhile, Ryu couldn't understand why Arahan was training so intensely. What was the point of all this exercise when they were about to die anyway? Before Arahan could respond, an officer arrived. Their numbers were called. It was time. As they stepped out, Arahan greeted their arrival with a smirk, while Ryu, still nervous, lamented his fate. Was this really the end? Soon, the long-awaited feast began. The 2 of them indulged in the legendary Verity beef, savoring every bite. Ryu was in awe. He had never tasted beef this delicious before. Arahan reminded him not to forget the reason he was able to enjoy such a meal. It was all thanks to him. As he ate, a system notification appeared. The penalties had been partially eased. Arahan could feel it. The experience that had been blocked was suddenly pouring in. The first objective was complete. Now it was time for the next. Meanwhile, in another part of the prison, an officer reported to the chief. The feast had begun. The chief acknowledged it, but gave strict orders. No one was to go near the dining area. Lost in thought, he reflected on the events of that day. Something had been off. There were no signs of forced restraint. It simply hadn't resonated the way it should have. Even though he was retired, he was still a 5-circle knight. There was no way a young magician who hadn't even unlocked his mana could have withstood his aura. Something had gone terribly wrong that day. This time, he would ensure proper confirmation. The humiliation he suffered would be repaid several times over. Back at the dining hall, the meal had come to an end. Ryu leaned back, completely satisfied. It had been absolutely incredible. He felt like he had no regrets, even if he were to die now. But Arahan's response was clear. He couldn't afford to die just yet. As he reflected, he could feel the effects of the meal. His body was full of energy, strength brimming in every muscle. He could probably punch a bag all day long without tiring. At that moment, the chief arrived. Arahan, already expecting him, greeted him with a smirk. But it was too late. The food was already gone. The chief, however, wasn't here for the meal. He called out to Arahan, addressing him directly. Arahan, amused, teased him. Was he sulking because he didn't get his share? The chief smirked. His thoughts were clear. Arahan was an arrogant fool, relying too much on his background. Placing a firm hand on Arahan's shoulder, his intentions became evident. For now, he would make sure that wretched face succumbed to agony. Their eyes locked, both of them smirking. The real battle had only just begun. The chief pondered over Arahan's lineage. Coming from a most elite magical family, even the smallest piece of information about him could be highly valuable. Depending on the quality of the intel, it might even help him escape his current stagnant position. Meanwhile, Arahan's eyes caught something. The chief's bracelet. A faint purple aura was emanating from it. Suddenly, the aura surged with immense power, filling the air with an oppressive force. The chief laughed confidently, taunting Arahan, certain that not even he could withstand this. The overwhelming aura struck Ryu hard. He collapsed, writhing in pain, begging for it to stop. Arahan, unfazed, warned the chief to control himself. The chief, irritated by his arrogance, scoffed at the idea of being told how to behave. Grabbing Arahan's shoulder, he sneered. How would he escape now? his powerful aura would crush him. But Arahan simply brushed his hand off and smirked. He taunted the chief, telling him to stop whining like a child. If he truly wanted to kill someone, he should execute them properly. The chief's confidence wavered. He had even used his magic tool, yet Arahan stood unaffected. His mind raced. If his mana had no effect, that meant Arahan's abilities were at least one level above his own. Could it be possible that this young magician had already reached the 6th circle level? No, that was impossible. Or was this the power of the Arahan bloodline? The realization was too much to ignore. 5-circle magic was something honed over a lifetime. Yet, even a fledgling magician like Arahan hadn't bowed before him. Accepting defeat, the chief withdrew his aura. Arahan, unimpressed, asked if he was finally done wasting his efforts. The chief, regaining his composure, announced that the execution would take place first thing in the morning. Even someone as magnificent as Arahan couldn't defy the law decreed by the Imperial Majesty. This would be his last night. Later, the chief sat in his office, documenting the day's events. He hadn't figured it all out yet, but this information might be invaluable for active nights. Exhausted after pushing his mana to the limit and using his magic tool, he forced himself to complete his report. Meanwhile, Ryu, who had passed out from the sheer intensity of the chief's aura, slowly regained consciousness. Arahan checked on him, asking how he felt. Ryu groaned, nauseous and on the verge of vomiting. Despite that, Arahan acknowledged Ryu's skill. He had quick hands. Then, a surprising revelation, Ryu had stolen the gate key. During the chief's distraction, while he was too focused on overpowering Arahan, Ryu had seized the opportunity. Pleased, Arahan praised him. For a normal person, that would have been extremely risky, but Ryu had proven to be surprisingly resilient. Ryu admitted that it had only worked because the chief's attention was elsewhere. But what about Arahan? Was he really okay? Arahan assured him he was fine. Ryu, still suspicious, couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he didn't understand. Arahan changed the subject, testing Ryu's strength. He had him lift stones, checking his stats. The results were clear. His strength, agility, and endurance had each increased by 10. Arahan was thrilled. The food had lived up to its promise, both delicious and highly nutritious. His body felt amazing, stronger than ever before. If only he could remove his penalties faster. But for now, he would have to accept things as they were, without wasting time. He turned to Ryu. They needed to leave that night. Once Ryu had recovered enough, they were making their move. Ryu hesitated. Was it necessary to leave so soon? The warden could notice at any moment. Arahan reassured him. The warden should already be passed out. Ryu was skeptical. How could he be so sure? Arahan explained. The chief's bracelet was a rare and highly coveted item. While it amplified mana instantly, it also inflicted severe fatigue. Considering how much power the chief had used earlier, he was likely unconscious by now. Everything had gone exactly according to plan. It was time to move. Ryu, still uncertain, hesitated. Arahan smirked. If he was scared, so be it. But Ryu wasn't backing down. He was Arahan's sidekick, after all. However, there was one problem. There was no key for their room. What now? Arahan had a simple solution. Without a second thought, he stepped forward and kicked the door. The gate shattered instantly. Ryu stood frozen in shock. What kind of power was this? Was Arahan really a magician? Their escape didn't go unnoticed. Officers spotted them and demanded to know what they were doing. Arahan, with his usual arrogance, responded casually. What else would they be doing in the middle of the night? They were escaping. The officers shouted, ordering everyone to capture them immediately. Someone had to alert the chief, but Arahan and Ryu didn't stop. They rushed toward the main gate. Once there, they were met with a new obstacle, a squad of officers blocking their path. Arahan didn't hesitate. He told Ryu to keep running, no matter what happened. Ryu listened, trusting him completely. Then, the real fight began. Arahan tore through the officers with ease, his strength and speed overwhelming them. He fought like a beast, completely in his element. Ryu watched in awe. Arahan's power was incredible, far beyond what he had imagined. with the officers defeated. The two of them escaped into the night. Sometime later, the chief arrived at the scene. His eyes fell on the fallen officers scattered across the ground. The guards reported the news. Numbers 218 and 172 had escaped. The chief, furious, wasted no time. He ordered an immediate manhunt. Arahan and Ryu had to be captured at any cost. Arahan and Ryu hid inside two large crates, catching their breath after their escape. Moving quickly, they soon found themselves near Motoma village, a small town close to the detention center. Ryu, now known as Zed, observed their surroundings and noted that the guards had likely lost track of them. He informed Arahan that they were in a village called Mota, the only settlement near the detention center. Arahan immediately realized the problem. If this was the closest village, then the guards would surely search here first. Ryu acknowledged the risk, but explained that the other towns were too far away. Their best chance was to blend in with the locals. If they managed that, they could stay hidden. Arahan agreed to follow his lead for now, but questioned what exactly Ryu was looking for. Without answering, Ryu handed him some clothes to wear. He also changed into a new outfit himself. The clothes were old and tattered, making Arahan scoff. They were exactly the kind of trash a beggar would pick. Ryu, however, pointed out that the village was filled with beggars. Disguising themselves as one was their safest option. He then decided to fetch some necessities, instructing Arahan to stay completely still like a rat while he was gone. Arahan questioned how Ryu planned to get supplies without any money. Ryu simply asked why he would need money in the first place. Arahan was taken aback by his way of thinking. This guy truly operated on a different level. Before leaving, Ryu warned him not to go anywhere. After all, he was Arahan's sidekick, and he intended to stick with him. An hour or two later, Ryu returned. Arahan immediately asked what he had managed to get. Ryu revealed his find, colored lenses. Arahan was skeptical. Would lenses really be enough? Still, he put on the blue lenses Ryu had brought, adjusting them before deciding they were acceptable. He reminded Ryu to be cautious. Red eyes were a symbol of the Arahan bloodline. Ryu explained in the southern region, under the Bahal clan's rule, blue lenses were currently in fashion. Aristocrats treated eye color as just another accessory. Hearing the name Bahal, Arahan's thoughts drifted. Bahal was a well-known clan. His main character had once been Torres Bahal, the final protagonist in the game's last stage. On the magical side, the strongest name was Arahan, while among swordsmen, it was Bahal. True to the world structure, the two factions despise each other, reflected even in their opposite eye colors. Breaking his thoughts, Ryu mentioned that he had found a good resting spot on his way back. He urged Arahan to follow him so they could take a short break. The two of them arrived in an abandoned stable, where they finally laid down to rest. As Arahan stared at the ceiling, he couldn't help but reflect on how things had turned out. One moment, he had opened his eyes as a prisoner, as if he'd been thrown into a game. Now, he was hiding in a stable just to get some sleep. Despite the absurdity of the situation, he found it somewhat entertaining. Still, there was one thing that puzzled him. Ryu, why did this guy keep sticking with him? He'd call him his sidekick, but he knew that being around Arahan was dangerous. Clark was targeting him, yet Ryu stayed close. He didn't know much about him. As far as he could tell, Ryu was just a street kid, a pickpocket. For now, Arahan needed his help, but could he really trust him in the long run? Morning arrived, and the two of them woke up. Arahan looked around, finally able to see clearly. The previous night had been too dark, but now he realized just how miserable their shelter had been. Ryu yawned and teased him. Being an elite noble, he must have found places like this unbearable. Arahan countered by asking if anyone actually liked living in such conditions. Ryu replied that no one chose such places because they loved them. They simply settled where they could. Arahan sighed. He couldn't continue like this. He needed to start making money, but to earn, he needed to eat and survive first. Ryu pointed out that avoiding the wardens was already tough enough. How did he plan to make money? Maybe he should start by learning some pickpocketing. Arahan dismissed the idea. He had something else in mind. He instructed Ryu to take him to a specific place, the arena. With that decision made, The two of them made their way to the underground arena. Erehon and Ryu entered the underground arena, where two fighters were engaged in a brutal battle. The crowd roared in excitement, cheering as the fighters relentlessly attacked each other. The spectators weren't just watching, they were actively encouraging the combatants to kill. Ryu, shaken by the violent atmosphere, whispered to Erehon that they had come to the wrong place. But Erehon remained unfazed. They were exactly where they needed to be. As the fight intensified, one of the fighters, a man with long hair, mercilessly pummeled his opponent. Blow after blow, he continued until the other man was half dead. Blood splattered all around the ring. Ryu's fear deepened. He turned to Erehon, horrified, pointing out that in this place, killing meant nothing. The long-haired fighter, named ICAs, was incredibly strong, and try to challenge him with basic techniques would be futile. But before Ryu could say anything more, he noticed that Erehon had disappeared. Looking toward the ring, he was shocked. Erehon had stepped inside. Without hesitation, Erehon grabbed Ikazu's arm and told him to stop. The fight was over. The opponent was already knocked out. There was no need to continue. The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted in irritation. They didn't appreciate an outsider interfering. Turning to the referee, Erehon called him out. Had he been bribed? The match was clearly over, yet he was still allowing it to continue. Were there no rules at all? ICAs yanked his hand away, glaring at Erehon with a mocking tone. He sneered that a noble like him should be enjoying such brutality the most. Erehon, unfazed, questioned what made ICAs think he was a noble. His clothes were nothing but rags. He looked more like a beggar than an aristocrat. Realizing this, the crowd grew even more annoyed. Their entertainment had been ruined by some homeless kid. Erehon, however, silenced the complaints with a bold offer. He would personally fight ICAs to make up for interfering. With a confident smirk, he promised to give them an unforgettable show. Ryu rushed to Erehon, panicked and furious. He had warned him countless times. His arrogance was dangerous. ICAs wasn't just strong, he was on a completely different level. The entire arena was on his side. The odds of beating him weren't just slim, they were non-existent. Even if they had to favor the gods, Erehon had no chance of winning. This was absolutely insane. ICAs was off limits. Erehon needed to step down and fight someone else instead. But Erehon wasn't listening. His mind was already set. Instead of responding to Ryu's desperate warnings, he casually changed the subject. With a cheerful smile, he told Ryu that after the fight, they would feast as if it were their last day alive. The match began. ICAs studied Erehon closely. Despite his reckless behavior, he was oddly calm. There was something about him, something unusual. Though he looked like a mere 15-year-old, his breathing was steady, controlled. He had the composure of a veteran fighter. But what stood out the most was his stance. It was unlike anything ICAs had ever seen. A strange feeling crept over him, a sense of danger. The thought was ridiculous. A street kid was making him feel threatened. Shaking off the hesitation, ICAs charged at full speed. But before he could reach Erehon, a sudden impact sent shockwaves through his face. Blood splattered as Erehon's precise punch connected, breaking Ikazu's nose in an instant. Calmly, Erehon explained that a proper punch didn't require pulling the fist back. Instead, it should be thrown directly from a defensive position, traveling the shortest, fastest path to the opponent's face. Speed was a key, sometimes enhanced by body weight. Before ICAs could react, Erehon followed up with an even stronger punch. His fist slammed into Ikazu's face, knocking out several teeth in an instant. Blood dripped from his mouth as the crowd gasped in shock. Ryu sat anxiously, unable to watch the fight. He desperately prayed for Erehon's safety, dreading the outcome. But as the crowd erupted in loud cheers, curiosity got the better of him. Slowly, he opened his eyes, only to be utterly shocked. Erehon wasn't just holding his ground. He was completely dominating the fight. His relentless attacks left ICAs staggered and dazed. Blood streamed down Ikazu's face as his vision blurred, barely able to focus on his opponent. He couldn't comprehend how a mere child was overpowering him so easily. Summoning his last of strength, ICAs threw a desperate punch, but Arahan dodged it effortlessly, his movements precise and calculated. Amused, he taunted ICAs, questioning why he couldn't avoid such simple attacks. Then, without hesitation, he launched another rapid barrage of strikes. ICAs struggled to withstand the blows, but Arahan's final punch sent him flying through the air. His body crashed onto the ground, completely incapacitated. He couldn't move. Arahan turned to referee, casually suggesting that the match should end, unless they wanted ICAs to die right there. The nervous referee hesitated for a moment before officially declaring Arahan the winner. For Arahan, this fight had been nothing more than a warm-up. He briefly wondered if he'd been too harsh on ICAs. Afterward, he and Ryu approached the counter to collect their winnings. But when the payout was handed over, Arahan immediately noticed something was off. The amount was far lower than expected. Calculating quickly, he realized that with the odds set at 62-1, they should have received much more. He confronted the man at the counter, accusing him of trying to cheat them just because they looked young. With full confidence, Arahan insisted he knew how to do basic math, but the man stubbornly claimed the payout was correct. At that moment, Arahan noticed Ryu nervously avoiding eye contact, sweat forming on his forehead. Something wasn't right. Turning to Ryu, he demanded to know how much money had actually been bet. He had given clear instructions to put everything on the fight. Sheepishly, Ryu admitted that he disliked gambling. Instead of betting the full amount, he had kept some money aside for dinner. Before Arahan could respond, a woman approached them. She greeted him politely and requested a moment of his time. Suspicious, Arahan glanced at her and bluntly asked who she was. With a confident smile, the woman observed his reaction, made it clear this was his first time in the arena, introduced herself as Herna, the manager of the underground fights. She once again asked if they could speak privately, but Arahan had no interest in talking. Without hesitation, he turned away, walking toward the exit with Ryu. However, before they could leave, several guards stepped in, blocking their path. Arahan paused, staring at them calmly. Then, in a mocking tone, he asked if they were ready to end up like ICAs as well. He even offered them a few days' rest, just like their fallen champion. The guards remained firm, unwilling to move aside. Smirking, Arahan questioned if their loyalty to Herna was the reason they were so stubborn. At that moment, Herna herself intervened. With a cold expression, she revealed that ICAs was personally employed by her. Now that Arahan had defeated him, she expected him to understand her intentions. However, instead of taking any immediate action, she simply told him that she would let him go. For now, with a meaningful look, she promised that they would meet again soon, somewhere more comfortable than this arena. As she turned to leave, she made one final remark. She greatly admired strong fighters. As Arahan and Ryu waited for their meal at a restaurant, Ryu couldn't hold back his frustration. He scolded Arahan for acting arrogantly toward Herna, explaining that she wasn't just the arena manager, she was a real power behind the entire city. As long as they remained here, crossing paths with her again was inevitable. But Arahan dismissed Herna as nothing more than a money-hungry fox. Ryu confirmed that people actually called her that. He added that Herna had likely approached Arahan first to gain an advantage in recruiting him. Reflecting on this, Arahan recalled a similar situation from his past life. When he had first entered the world of martial arts, many sought him out, seeing his talent as nothing more than a way to make money. He had been deceived multiple times. However, meeting his coach had been pure luck, the man who turned him into a true champion. Thanks to that experience, he was no longer the naive kid who could be easily fooled. He had climbed step by step from the bottom to reach the top. Finally, their food arrived, a plate of meat. Just as Ryu eagerly reached for it, Arahan suddenly stopped him. Confused, Ryu asked why. Barely able to control his hunger, Arahan pointed out that the meat's color looked off. It wasn't authentic Verity meat. He reasoned that if obtaining it was as simple as getting it from a nearby city, Chief Clark wouldn't have struggled for an entire week to acquire it. Verity meat was exceptionally rare, and no ordinary restaurant would serve it so casually. This was a scam, but Ryu didn't care. To him, meat was meat, and they were going to eat anyway. Arahan, however, refused to accept being cheated. He had paid specifically for real verity meat, making this a clear case of fraud. Calling the waiter over, he firmly demanded an explanation. The waiter, already annoyed, snapped at Arahan, calling him a nuisance from the moment he entered. He told him to eat quickly and leave since he had only ordered a single dish yet was wasting everyone's time. Arahan countered sharply, stating that the meat was fake and demanding the correct dish be served. He found it ridiculous that they would not only serve fake food, but also mistreat their customers. Mocking him, the waiter asked if Arahan thought this was some street vendor's cart where he could behave as he pleased. Arahan cut him off impatiently. He had no desire to argue with a mere waiter. He demanded to see the manager immediately. The waiter muttered under his breath that Arahan must be insane, but seeing the growing attention from other diners, he reluctantly led them to the manager. Upon entering, Ryu's stomach twisted in fear. A group of massive chefs stood there, mockingly asking if these two street kids were the ones causing trouble. Without hesitation, Arahan boldly stated that the real troublemaker was the one selling fake meat. The manager burst into laughter. He admired Arahan's courage, but warned him that he had clearly misunderstood his situation. But Arahan remained calm. He replied that it was actually the manager who didn't understand. If a fight broke out now, he should consider who would be the one ending up dead. Infuriated, the chefs attacked. They claimed they would teach Arahan a lesson he would never forget, but their efforts were meaningless. One by one, Arahan defeated them effortlessly. Suddenly, another chef lunged from behind, attempting to stab him with a knife. Arahan reacted instantly. He grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisted it, and slammed him to the ground, completely disarming him. At first, the manager had enjoyed the spectacle, but his smile quickly vanished. He realized that all his men had been taken down, leaving Arahan standing victorious. Smugly, Ryu remarked that they looked great in their defeated state. He then proudly informed them that the person they had challenged was the same one who had defeated ICAs. Hearing this, the manager's expression darkened. He had laughed when he first heard about Ikaza's loss, but now he was face to face with the one responsible. Nervously, he asked what Arahan wanted. Arahan stepped forward and made his demands clear. Since they had been deceived, he required two things. First, a full refund to the fake meal, and second, from now on, the restaurant must serve them genuine verity meat free of charge whenever they wanted. The manager swallowed hard, muttering that Arahan was nothing more than a thug openly extorting him. Later, as they entered their newly acquired room and inn, Ryu excitedly jumped onto the soft bed, exclaiming that he had never slept on anything so luxurious. Convinced nothing could feel better, he turned to Arahan with admiration. Ryu praised him, saying this was exactly what he expected from someone of noble blood. Arahan, preparing to sleep, warned Ryu that spreading misleading rumors wouldn't benefit them, but Ryu only laughed, teasing that he had never seen someone's face turn as red as the restaurant managers had. Thanks to that incident, they could now live comfortably. With that, they turned off the lights and settled in for the night. However, Ryu wasn't asleep. He quietly sat up in bed, carefully glancing toward Arahan to check if he was truly asleep. Seeing him lying with his back turned, seemingly resting, Ryu wrapped a scarf around himself and stealthily left the room. But Arahan had only been pretending to sleep. The moment Ryu exited, he opened his eyes. Several days later, Ryu entered Kim's room, finding him still training. He complained about Arahan's endless training, impatiently asking when they could finally eat. Jokingly, he remarked that most mages would rather die than do such exhausting daily exercises. Curious, he then asked if Arahan trained like this because he lacked mana. Arahan gave a vague response, saying it was something like that. Ryu found the answer strange, while Arahan himself felt frustrated. Despite all his effort, his mana level remained at 0, ending his morning training. Arahan finally declared it was time for breakfast. Excited, Ryu eagerly asked what they would eat, potatoes, salad, or chicken. Arahan suggested meat, for a change. Hearing this, Ryu was overjoyed at the thought of finally eating chicken. As they arrived at the restaurant, Arahan noted that they hadn't come for 3 days to avoid trouble. especially after eating 10 meals in a single day. He then asked Ryu how much money they had left. Ryu admitted there wasn't much remaining. The cost of staying at the inn had been high. Internally, Arahan felt frustrated. After living in this world for 10 years, he understood its economy well. Spending 50 gold coins in just a few days felt like throwing money away. He glanced at Ryu, suspecting that he thought Arahan wouldn't notice his strange behavior due to his noble background. Arahan decided to let it slide for now, so long as it didn't turn into outright betrayal. But he resolved to uncover the truth eventually. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, the manager received news of their arrival. Annoyed, he instructed his staff to proceed as planned. Soon after, Arahan and Ryu were escorted to a private room. A generous feast awaited them, with large portions of meat placed before them. The waiter warmly welcomed them, announcing that they had prepared a special feast. Thrilled, Ryu wondered aloud how much all this food must have cost. But Arahan immediately sensed something was off. Their treatment was suspiciously friendly. He observed carefully, noting that he hadn't seen any assassins or mercenaries lurking around. He wasn't sure what this sudden hospitality meant. Oblivious to Arahan's concerns, Ryu eagerly started eating, inviting Arahan to join him. Smiling, he wrapped a piece of meat in lettuce and handed it to Arahan, saying it prepared it specially for him. Arahan thanked him and was about to take a bite. But suddenly, he felt a strange sensation. Alarmed, he shouted for Ryu to spit out the meat. Under no circumstances should he swallow it.